All right, what's up, guys? We're live. Thanks everybody for dropping in on this. I'm going to be doing a lot of live streams for the next couple of weeks because I just don't have the time to edit the videos to the degree that I want to match the quality that I've kind of been working towards. Me and my wife just closed escrow on it's a beautiful house in North San Antonio, and we're moving in about 9 days, day after Thanksgiving. So we're going to be pretty busy. And I've been not struggling, but I've been working hard to keep up on all the mentorship packages that I've moved. I've been offering those $97 12-week programs. So keeping up on that, the live stream is going to be a good, quick, and easy way for me to stay in touch with you guys. Remember, if you do have a pressing question or if you want to get priority goes to people who support the channel through Patreon, through YouTube memberships, or through Super Chats. So I try to get to everybody as much as I can, but when they fill up, that's a quick way to get priority. So I'm actually going to start with the questions from a couple Patreon members. But real quick, I do got a show for the store. I'm going to have a link I don't think I put the link in the description. I'll have to do it after. But Empire Barbell Store, if you are interested in those 12-week programs, $97, they are personalized. It's not copy paste. Just this week, I had one guy that wanted a 6-day per week high frequency program, and he only had a half hour to train. And I had another guy who wanted a 3-day a week, 24-week prep for a strongman contest. And it's all based on your abilities. Seems like everybody trains out of their gym, right? So everybody has limited access or different access to equipment. So I spent a good amount of time on these. So you can check those out. And obviously the books on Amazon or on my store, Superior Deadlift. I'm going to be coming out with more shirts like these to match the books. I'm going to be doing a book series on pressing, on squatting, and I'm going to branch out into some other things like, off the top of my head, conditioning. I'm going to do one on just pure mass building. So over the next year, I'm going to spend a lot of time on putting these things out. So check those out if you can. Thank you, everybody, for your support. It makes this possible. Let's see who we got in the chats. DeShabel and Joey got here early. What's up, guys? Thank you, Zach. We are super excited. All right. And let's get into it, man. Let's start with the questions. So going from the Patreon page, I'm going to start with Shove It Skate. He's a brand new Patreon member. If deadlifts are a great developmental exercise, but the fatigue from them is too great, we know higher work is generally less fatiguing. Why do you think we tend to not see higher up deadlifting in programs to allow for higher frequency and muscle gain? And then there's a bonus question. As a tall guy over 6'3", is there any point to try to squeeze in a lower weight class in powerlifting and strongman, or should I just accept the fact that I have more room to grow and get huge? Well, the second one's the easiest one. Don't keep one foot in the water. You're 6'3", man. I know a couple of people that are very good middleweight, 105 kilogram strongmen that are 6'3". They're also dick skin shredded. They have no body fat on them. Some of them, it's from dieting and being like razor thin on point. Some of them are just hard gainers, and it's hard for them to put mass on. It's very hard to maintain or to build towards a competitive number if you're stretching yourself thin. It's just physics. A bigger frame is going to have it can hold more mass, but it's going to have to hold more mass to be able to move at the same level. So you're doing yourself a disservice by trying to stay light. There's kind of a saying that like weight classes are height or frame classes in disguise. And there's some truth to that. There's individual variation, but there's some truth to that. So the taller you are, that's a sure sign that if you want to be competitive, if you want to hang with the other guys in a particular weight class, that you're going to have to fill yourself out. And you're not going to fill yourself out in in the 198s or the 220s if you're 6'3". And the longer you try to stay competitive, because that's another thing, people try to fill out weight classes before they move on. The longer you try to stay competitive, the longer you're pushing that off. And gaining muscle is hard. Anybody can lean out really quickly. Gaining muscle, the 5 pounds of fat loss takes a couple weeks. 5 pounds of muscle gain, once you get better, could take months, up to a year. So the longer you put that off, the longer you're ensuring that you're not really going to be competitive. So I always recommend people paying attention to their frame and making decisions that way. So to answer his first question about deadlifts and rep volume, so he did say that high rep deadlifts are generally less stressful than heavy deadlifts. And there's some truth to that, assuming that effort's high. There is some truth to that. I think of max effort deadlifts with effort, really draining on the CNS, takes a lot of neural activity to recruit all of those muscles and get things firing all at once. Reps, not so much, but a lot more local fatigue. And it's local fatigue meaning in the muscle, but local fatigue over your entire body. So it's systemic and it's local. So muscles being damaged, needing to recover. So it's less, but it's different. It's a different type of stress. If you're putting effort into high rep deads, you're not going to be able to do that very frequently. Now, if you're doing high rep deadlifts with reduced effort, if you're waiving like your RPE or the percentages, if you're training submaximal, it's a little more doable, but that's kind of true with every exercise. I really think it's the type of exercise you apply yourself to. If you do want to use deadlifts as a developmental exercise and you want the volume high, you want the frequency high, and you don't want it to just absolutely destroy the rest of your lifts. So you come in feeling like you got hit by a dump truck and you're supposed to squat, or worse yet, do like a standing press or some strongman event day. RDLs are my go-to. They're magical. Yeah, the weight has to be reduced, but you'll be amazed when you start to get good at them. It'll tick up closer to what you can pull from the floor. And they just tend to be so much friendlier. Because you're not allowing for these form breaks. You have to keep your posture tight. You're putting it all in your hips. Your hips have to hinge back and hinge forward. So you're kind of isolating that movement pattern. But it is like the bodybuilding developmental variation of the deadlift. And I think they're fantastic for that reason. So if you do want a little more frequency, and if you do want primarily mass and developmental movement from the deadlift without it being the main focus of your training, RDLs, multiple sets, 8, 10, 12 reps. If you do that from the floor, it's that first break off the floor. That I think is where most of the stress and that neural drive really comes from. So adding that in on each rep, I think really hamstrings how much volume you're able to handle. Then again, the trade-off is load and power development. So that's it's a good question. It is really a good question. All these lifts hit you differently, and you have to have some familiarity with generally how they tend to hit you. Especially with individual factors, because there are people that can handle high frequency deads and they don't seem to fall apart. And that usually comes down to things that you can't really train for, physics, limb length, things like that. If you have really long arms and your hips and knees are really open at the start of a pull, the overall stress from each pull off the ground is going to be lower because you're starting in a more mechanically advantaged position. And again, it's something you can't train for. But RDLs, man, RDLs are gold. I love telling the story. I was at the training hall where Ode Haugen, Martins Lisis used to train there. Ode Haugen runs that gym. And I was talking to him and I'm like, most impressive thing I've ever seen. Martins Lisis did like in training an 800-pound deadlift for reps, dead stop, no hitch, no suit, just super beautiful pulls. And I'm like, man, that was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. And Ode's like, it's all the RDLs he does. Every time he squats, he finishes off with RDLs, very slow, very controlled, very technically perfect. And that led to the hindquarters that man has to be able to put out that amount of force. So yeah, again, balancing the amount of force you're able to put out with the stress being low enough that you can actually recover from it. So that was a good question. Okay, getting into Daniel Earp, frequent contributor on Patreon. Let's see. So Daniel's just basically talking about pain. He's talking about how he has shoulder pain from upper body, and he's made some good progress from some of the base programs that he outlined from videos I put out last year and this year. And he's talking about how his shoulder hurts because he broke his arm when he was 15. And it usually gets better. So if he starts with an overhead press, the first set is like 6 out of 10, then it goes to a 5, and then finishes at a 2 out of 10. So, okay, so it gets better as time goes on. He's getting stronger. He's mainly wondering if he should incorporate variations to give his shoulder a bit of a rest without compromising gains, because he's just been kind of putting his head down and going through it. And then he even goes so far as to outline movements and variations he's been doing with how difficult they've been or how painful they've been. And this is actually not surprising. He cites for overhead push pressing being the most doable that causes least pain, and close grip bench pressing. And that's pretty common when I've had shoulder issues in the past, because I've had a few. Those have been the ones that I've defaulted to. So When to push through pain, that is a very, very difficult one to address. And I am not a doctor or physical therapist. I'm just telling you what I do. What I do is kind of dumb, but it works given the lack of information that I have. I just cast a wide net. So if I am feeling pain, there's kind of a blanket approach I have to take because I don't know what it is. I don't have a diagnosis. I'm not going to go get one because doctors, they're not useless, but they're next to useless. And it's usually, here's some anti-inflammatories, here's some painkillers, stop lifting. And that's about as much as they can do unless you throw a fit and get in to see a specialist. What I always do, stop doing the thing that hurts, find some entry point that uses and variations are actually a very good way to do this. Find some movement you can do that doesn't hurt, or at least doesn't hurt as much, and see in what ways you can progress without causing pain. It's not just pain during the workout. You got to pay attention to inflammation after the workout. You might feel good during a workout, but if you wake up the next morning, you're like, shit, I can't move my arm. It's no bueno. So you have to pay attention to these things. And the goal is to find a sustainable amount of work that you can chip away at that doesn't cause a problem to get worse. And the shoulder is such a varied joint. It's such a complex joint with, a lot of articulation. You can generally find some movement or some way of lifting that doesn't bother it and just milk it dry until you feel like you're good to kind of revisit those other movements. So he says wide benching hurts the most. I could have told you that. Wide benching puts the shoulder through the greatest. It's like doing a really wide dumbbell fly. It puts the shoulder through the greatest amount of motion. So you're not going to want to do that. I would absolutely look at incorporating those movements, especially push pressing and close grip. Fantastic developmental movements. And I actually leaned on push presses heavily when I was into contest prep and my shoulder hurt too much to do strict presses. I've gone through phases like that. And then general stuff to keep it in one piece: blood flow, blood flow, blood flow. Banded stuff, high rep stuff before you work out, face pulls, external rotations. I like seated dumbbell cleans. If you look up that video, it's like an upright row and do an external rotation. Get the rear delt, the rotator cuff, not just to get them strong, which they need to be, but also to just drive blood in there, and it'll help get your shoulder feeling a little bit better. And philosophically, that goes into how people organize their training to begin with. If you look at something like conjugate, it claims to be a better option, even though you're going heavier more often. The idea is that you're going to prevent overuse issues by moving through different planes. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with that. It's a trade-off between the movement being varied and the sheer load. But that's the idea. At the very least, you can experiment. So I would absolutely rotate some things in, find something that doesn't hurt, and find a way to progress it. And you can progress it in other ways besides adding weight. Step load. Start with something light for a few reps. Over time, add reps, add weight. I did a movement where I would do a strict military press, but I would hang weights from the bands, which is very conjugate-y. And the reason I would do that is because the give in the bands as you go to push was super gentle. I mean, it's unstable. The muscles would be on fire because they'd be working to control that oscillation. But the give was so much easier on my shoulder. I was able to get in some really good work, and I keep the reps high and I keep a tempo on it. And that was a good entry point. After a couple of weeks, I was able to go very light with a strict press. And after a couple of weeks, I was able to taper the weight back up. That's kind of injury management 101. So thank you for those two questions. Those both came from our Patreon members, Shove It Skate and Daniel Earp. So remember, priority goes to members, YouTube members or Patreon members. So now let's start to get through this chat. Let's see what we got going on back here. Let's see, forearm pain during the bench press. Do I know what it might be? That's a hard one. When you bench, you should be squeezing the bar, and what you get is activation all the way down through your elbow. In fact, that's a really good cue to try and get rigid through your elbow. Everybody talks about getting your scapula back, trying to build tension in your shoulders and moving into your lats. You want that same rigidness in your elbow. So squeezing through your pinky, and it actually activates your tricep, and it makes your tricep a little more powerful. It's Sherrington's law of irradiation. Pavel's talked about it. You squeeze a fist, harder you squeeze, the more activation you get all the way up to your shoulder. But anyways, the pain in your forearm, if it's your elbow, or if it's actually a muscle, if it's further down, I have no idea what it might be. I know that using different grips, like putting fat grips on a barbell or using an axle by opening your hand up, sometimes that can help with elbow tendonitis, something to look into. But same rule applies for injury. Find something that doesn't hurt and progress forward. Use anti-inflammatory sparingly. You can kick on EquiBlock, man. Icy hot, deep blue EquiBlock. That actually helps a lot too. Keep sleeves on to get it warm. That's pretty standard. Let's see, Freddie Bauer. How fatigued should someone be at the end of a base block? In your experience, are deloads almost always a good idea before going into a peak block? Also, congrats on the house. Thank you. Pretty fatigued. And it depends how you run it, because there's variations that volumize where the volume goes up and then drops back and goes up. So if you're going from 3 to 4 to 5 sets, the third week is a bloodbath, especially if the weight's ticking up at the same time. So by the end of it, because generally I advocate for a block, it's starting on hard ground and driving into the mud and then backing up and getting that traction and pushing forward again. So it's frequently work, recover, get that momentum, work, recover. Deloads do that. It's just more punctuated. But I like this kind of ebbing and flowing back and forth. It's easy to follow and it takes care of a lot of those questions. Pretty fatigued. If you're on the last workout of your base block, I mean, it should be a struggle. You should plan for that. And yeah, I would generally say that a deload would be a good idea. You don't necessarily have to, because a lot of the peaks that I write out do the same thing. They start out. I tend to start out with the easiest workout instead of the hardest workout. Linear periodization and a lot of those types of old school oversimplified approaches to periodization do that. Where like the first workout's the biggest one when you're like the least conditioned, and then everything tapers down evenly over time. I generally start each wave and each block with the easiest workout. So if you're going in, getting a baseline in your peak phase, the percentages are low. Typically the volume's a little lower, especially proportionate to what you were doing in the base phase. You might not need it. That might be enough recovery. But if you're feeling ground to a pulp, by all means, take a deload. I don't write a ton about deloads because they're very personalized. They're very individual. A lot of different ways to do them. It's just recovery. So if the ebb and flow, if the pacing of your progression is unsustainable, that's when a deload is merited. But deloads aren't even defined in textbooks. I mean, I have 3 or 4 in my office, and I've looked through each of them. Deloads aren't even defined. So when people try to argue about what they are, when they should be thrown in, it is entirely, it's something that is in a journeyman's toolbox that you just know, oh, I have this option to do this thing. As long as it's less weight, less volume, as long as it allows you to recover, that's it. So yeah, if you feel like you're beat up by the end, absolutely take that deload. HJM, bad hip pain when squatting heavy, working on getting mobility back. Now I'm trying to get my deadlift stronger at 315. What can I do to get stronger at deadlifts without squats? There's quite a bit you should do. If you're looking at 315, I mean, that's stronger than average, but that's not even past the newbie gain stage. You'll be able to get stronger with a lot of indirect work. You're not even at the point where you need to be specialized. Now, as far as diagnosing the problem or what you should do to get around it, I can't do that from here with that amount of information. I can tell you, get stronger at deadlift without squats. Deadlifts, honestly. I mean, I know some guys that competed in strongman for years were really good. They had knee problems. They couldn't squat at all. They had to basically become one-trick pony. They were all posterior. Now, it's not cool to see your quads deteriorate into nothing, and there's certain events where that might hurt you on. But if you're just interested in building up your deadlift, you can do it without squats. If you have the ability to squat, I don't know why you would. But if you're being hamstrung by something, there's no reason to keep pushing through it. If you need time to let it clear out and let it recover, I do recommend incorporating some active rehab, though. Active rehab for your squat. Bodyweight stuff, mobility is a good start. Get in to see a PT if you can. But again, find that entry point, and then if it doesn't hurt, start chipping away. And after couple months, you might find you can start incorporating them again. And that's a hard one. I feel you, man. We've all been through that. And I wish there was a straightforward answer I can give you, and there really isn't. But if you're just trying to get your pull stronger, more time on your abs, more time on your upper back, more time on your glutes and hamstrings, more time pulling, so it's almost a benefit in that sense, because recovery doesn't have to go into the squat bucket. Zachary D, what do you think about the earthquake band bell bar gimmick are actually useful? That's funny. I was just talking about that. That's kind of what I was doing when I was hanging the weights from the bands. I was inclined to say gimmicky because it's one of those things that's new that people see like, oh, I got to have that. And most people don't need anything like that. It doesn't actually solve a problem. Is it different? Yeah. Can it provide some benefit? Sure. I liked it for working around dodgy joints. It was easier in that sense to get reps in without it hurting the joint from the oscillation. Um, Fucking Nick Camby, man. Nick Camby got himself a Tsunami Bar sponsorship because he was constantly posting his IG videos of him doing jerks with, over 300 pounds with this bar that it was just like a floppy dildo, just whipping back and forth. And if anybody's trained on even a normal whippy bar, once you get to 3-4 plates and up, you feel the difference between a power bar and an Olympic bar. I remember hitting a big squat at like a Fitness 19, and never in my life have I felt like I was going to get stapled in the hole. I always bounce up about halfway, and that's it. I remember sinking into the bottom, and it was this real thin, kind of cheap Olympic bar that they used once they started having all the functional fitness stuff come into corporate gyms. And I came down, and I just remember the flex. I thought I was going to get just shoved through the ground. It's different. So then when you add that extreme oscillation, those forces get higher, more chaotic. I'm not going to say it offers very specific, useful carryover to a lot of people. Nick Camby uses them for just about everything. And I have a hard time arguing against it. I mean, he was good with a jerk anyways. He was good with overhead anyways. But those are definitely a staple in his training. And maybe for something like strongman that is more varied and randomized, you have to be in strong positions and a lot of different movement patterns. There's probably some generic benefit there. For the average person, unless you are competitive, unless you need to specialize, unless you're already pretty strong, I think it's a distraction. I mean, you need more focus on foundational movements, not more newer ways to destabilize your training. So that's my thought on that. It's yes, but actually no. Why does strict overhead press scale harder with body weight than the jerk? Why does the strict overhead press scale harder with body weight than the jerk? God, I need a chart to draw that out. I'm like, does it? And if it does, to what degree? That's not something I've thought about enough. I don't really know. I mean, the potential for the jerk is so much higher because it is a whole body lift, because it doesn't require an ever increasing amount of upper body strength. Strict press does. It's 1-to-1. You need bigger and stronger shoulders and triceps to move bigger weight. And then it's like your body weight goes up, that ratio drops a little bit, and then your potential for strength increases. So then you might get a little stronger and that ratio might come up. But as body weight increases to accommodate more weight, that gap of strength body weight ratio increases. And that's normal. I mean, we see that with everything. We see that with benching, squatting, deadlifting. Highest strength body weight ratios are from guys in like the 165, 132 class. An elephant can't squat a fraction of its body weight. An ant can lift 50 times its body weight. It's just how physics and gravity and everything works. The more mass you get, the more weight you have in order to be stronger. But a jerk, it's explosive, it's technical, it doesn't require moving the bar as far, and it actually doesn't require overwhelming amount of upper body strength. It helps, but it's not required. So I think that's why it's whole body lift. But I'm not an expert on Olympic weightlifting by any stretch. 400 to 500 push-ups a day from G5988. 6 foot, and I've been experiencing some shoulder pain. Should I progress with pull-ups, or how do I work out my back muscles? There's a lot of questions in there. If you're experiencing shoulder pain, you're doing too many push-ups. You don't need to do 500 push-ups, and I can't think of a scenario where you need to do 500 push-ups. If that volume of light body weight stuff isn't going to get you bigger, it's probably not going to get you stronger. You need to progress to harder push-ups that require more strength and force. So then you move to one arm, or you move to diamond push-ups, or you move to dips, or whatever. So progressing difficulty instead of just more work. So you're likely getting overuse issues from that. And if you're not doing pull-ups or you're not doing back work, that's also why, because everything pulls forward, right? Because you're overtraining the anterior muscles. You're not training your posterior muscles, so they're not balanced. So yeah, you need to do pull-ups. Here's a good way: just superset your push-ups, your pull-ups. Experiment with different variations, but you absolutely need to do back work. How do I work out my back muscles? There's so many good videos or books. That's beyond the scope of what I can cover here. Simple question, right? But it would take a lot more time than we have right now. My low back is weak. I want to deadlift 2 times per week, which is something I've never done. Any advice on how to approach this? Okay, so if your lower back is weak, that's going to be the point that gets exploited. And let's just say it's not your lower back, it's your midsection. It's your lower back and your abdominals and your obliques, and probably your knowledge of how to use all of them together to brace properly. So, one, make sure that you're getting ample abdominal work, whether it's just bracing, 90-90 breathing, dead bugs, bird dogs, planks, whatever, or whether it's actually things like sit ups, leg raises, and so on. So, that's one, do that every single workout. Two, don't go around trying to destroy your lower back with extra work. I've done this. I think a lot of people have done this. So my lower back's a weak point. I lose posture when I deadlift. Let me just do more lower back work. The reason lower back gets annihilated with higher frequency deadlifts, or if you go nuts deadlifting, it's a relatively small muscle, your erectors that run up the length of your spine, and it bows when it gives. So when you're breaking yourself, you're getting all this eccentric where the muscle stretches as you give. Well, eccentric loading, like when you're talking about like a negative on a bench as you fail, if you've ever done heavy negatives, God help you if you've ever done it on leg work, that's where most of muscle teardown is thought to happen, is in the eccentric. Now that's good for building up, but it's also a huge, huge recovery cost, and it's hard to bounce back from. So if that's how all of your deadlifts go, then you're going to constantly be, if not sore, fatigued. And you're going to notice workout to workout, you'll have hit and miss workouts. Sometimes you'll be really strong. Sometimes you'll be weak, and your shoulders will dump, your back will give. So focus on bracing. Use deadlift technique to strengthen your lower back, meaning all of your weights are selected by what you can maintain a perfect posture, a perfect position with. So if that means dropping your training max way down, do it. I had to do that for about a year and a half. It was game changing. It's not sexy. Nobody likes doing it, but you're not going to deadlift twice per week if you're working to limit, and if you're letting your form go, and if you're piling on a bunch of lower back work on top of it. If you're deadlifting once a week, or you're going heavy once every 9 or 10 days, you can absolutely have like a full power building type workout where you do a bunch of targeted work because you have time to recover. Twice a week, absolutely not. Your abs can take the work frequently. Your erectors can't, especially in the face of high frequency deadlifting. So that's it. So I'd recommend staggering it, either DUP split, where you're doing different rep ranges on each day. Both days should be very, very sub-maximal. There should be no sets where you're close to limit. You should have 3 or more reps in the tank on each one, especially if you're doing repeating sets. Keep your technique locked in. As time goes on, it will become second nature to the point where you can go super maximal and your spine doesn't give. You just have to be patient. Joey, on the topic of bench, can you please explain using your lats as a roadblock again? I can't seem to figure it out. I've tried to switch, develop from lighter weight, different techniques. It's helpful in a particularly competitive, exaggerated setup, but I don't think everybody needs that. And I think it gets overblown. I'll explain it if you can see me right here. So I have my lat right here. And if I bring my elbow in, so it's like you're twisting the bar. And that's a cue they often say, try to break the bar apart. So as I twist, see my elbow comes down and my lat tenses. And as the lat tenses, not only is it tight, so it's like rigid and protruding, but as the elbow comes down, it's running into the lat. So for one, you need a lat for that to work. So if you're skinny or if you're not very physically developed, there might not be anything there to run into. As you get a little more developed and your lat pops out, as you come down, you will feel it interfere. But depending on your build, you might have to really crank the elbows in. That might require your elbows staying too close to your body for it to really be an effective or viable setup. It's something that I would not worry about. Learn how to build tension. You want to feel rigidness in your elbow. And by trying to crank the bar a little bit, you'll feel tension through your shoulder and you'll feel that lat kick out a little bit. But just about everybody is better off using pressing as a developmental exercise until you get to the point where you are strong enough to actually look at competing. Then you tighten those things up, but it's not all at once. It's little points. So you'll find guys at the top that use it a lot. You'll find guys that don't use it very much. Personal preference kind of comes into it as well. So I would not overthink that. Okay. Luke Huco. Oh, that's who I was talking about. Shout out to Luke. He was the high frequency program I mentioned earlier. Not a question. Just wanted to say day one of 4x12 squats was shockingly difficult. Everyone should high rep squat, baby. That's right. And that's what I did for him. I base phase, because it's 3 days a week of squatting, 3 days a week pressing. I did a DUP split for the base because it's better developmentally. I hate to quote studies, but there have been some studies that show that as well. It's also just different from what most people do. And it's kind of a shock to the system. So I had him do, I think 12s and then like sixes and then like threes. So it's a DUP split on each lift. And then in the base phase, it's going to go more to like almost like a Texas method thing, like a heavy, light, medium thing, where it's the same rep range, but now we're just going arbitrarily heavier, lighter to allow you to recover. That's a little more specific to strength and performance, because the workouts aren't just different stresses. It's different it's different recovery. So it allows you to prepare for those heavier workouts, where 4x12, that's not recovery in any stretch of the imagination. So glad to hear that kicked your ass. Just make sure you're eating and sleeping, man, because that's a rough program. It's only 2 exercises a day, but that's a rough program. It just goes to show how you can make anything work. You can make anything work. High frequency, low frequency, conjugate, classical periodization, simple LPs, these cutesy wave programs that exist everywhere, like the ones I write. You can make them all work. Each one just has its own set of rules. You just have to pay attention, address problems as they come along, instead of trying to do these wide sweeping changes to like fix everything all at once. It's all titration. JMCA does lift. How do I identify my weak points when strength standards and muscle size indicate different things? When strength standards and muscle size indicate different things, meaning you can't just look at one or the other to identify weak points. That's a hard one. Most people don't really need to hyper focus on weak points. And I say that because most people should be doing a generalized enough training approach, something like bodybuilding, power building, to develop a well-rounded physique. And this is my pet peeve, is that this era in the last 5-10 years of young powerlifters start out hyper specializing, which is completely backwards. Excuse me. Oh man, me and my wife were up late last night celebrating, and I'm paying for it today, man. I've went through half a bottle of Tums already. Perfect example, Boris Shako. He came out of the Soviet system. He did Olympic weightlifting, all the things that we cite. He lived, did very well at, and now applies to powerlifting. He's one of the best in the game, if not the best in the game. And he has a novice template out there. His novice template is widely varied. It's widely varied. Bodyweight stuff, unilateral stuff, dumbbells. I think there's even some machines in there. It's varied. And that is exactly in line with how all athletic training goes. Common wisdom with athletic training with youth, or let's just say new athletes: build a wide foundation of skill set. Don't give your kids a golf club and expect them to swing it 8 hours a day if you want them to be the next Tiger Woods. Have them play multiple sports. Have them engage in different activities, work different thresholds. That is going to suit them the best long term. It's the same with lifting. When you're new and you're coming into it, you need variety. It should be a default part of your training. So weak points implies that you already have this kind of well-rounded base, and you've been training long enough, you're strong enough to see obvious discrepancies. So for most people, it's just your training isn't well-rounded enough. Don't worry about identifying. Just get your training more well-rounded, because you should solve these problems before they happen. If you are a little more developed, this isn't a question you're really going to be asking, because you'll be so in tune with everything that you'll notice the lag. Now, for instance, if you do want to identify, let's say take a bench press, for example. I have generally big shoulders, bigger than my arms. My arms are actually kind of pathetically small, which is something I plan on fixing in 2022. But I know my triceps are weak. And I know that even though I can press out big weights, I know that because of my leverages, I have short arms, and so much of the work gets initiated by my front delts, my triceps don't have to do a lot. So for that reason, my lockout kind of sucks in the rare event that I get stuck at lockout. And my triceps are small. That one's obvious. It hits me in the face. When you're looking at more complex movements, when you're trying to troubleshoot a deadlift, I mean, I have a good amount written up in my deadlift book, Superior Deadlift. Check that out on Amazon. I have a good amount at the end of the book dedicated to troubleshooting weaknesses and looking at them as both a byproduct of a movement pattern where you're weak at a certain position and individual muscles that are making you weak in that movement pattern. You can attack it from either side. Looking at muscular differences is the easiest. It's the simplest. Looking at it from movement patterns, we're like, oh, I miss mid shin, so let me do a bunch of pause deadlifts. That's trickier. It's harder to implement. or I would say it has more pitfalls, and it's really only valuable for the most specialized among you. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but that's kind of my generic rant on that. All right, enigmatic. Oh wait, I lost my spot. Man, these comments. I appreciate all the questions in here, guys. I appreciate, again, if you want to jump your question up, utilize the super chat, because that just guarantees that I can get to your questions. Because right now I'm just reading them in order. So if you're putting questions now, there's a pretty low chance I'm going to get to. I got about 20 or so minutes left, and I'm going to try to tear through these. But let's see. Let me find my spot. More lower back and knee pain. I have a hard time with the pain questions, because, again, I take a generic approach. I can't diagnose things. Lower back and knee pain, no, it's not normal when doing squats, or it's not something you should tolerate. Been experienced a bit of both. I wonder if it's something I can prevent somehow. It absolutely is. It absolutely is positioning, mobility, and holding a very, very, very high technical standard. And it might be something you have to outsource, get a coach, not an online coach. Get somebody to look at you in person, and not some idiot at Fitness 19. Get somebody who actually handles athletes and knows what the hell they're doing. And it's hard to find. I wish there was just Angie's List for really good coaches, but you have to ask around, take some digging. Read as much and watch as much as you can. High technical standard. Make sure you're warming up. Make sure you're not going too heavy. Everything's submaximal. Let the barrier of pain be the upper limit of what you go to. Henry Augustine, I'm going to be competing in an event with a log clean and press, but won't be able to get my hands on a log before the event. So it's a relation between push press or strict press and log numbers. That is extremely hard to answer because it's wildly different. It has to do with how much the log kicks you out of your normal position, things like arm length and how tall you are and how long your torso is. That makes a big difference. Also, just how generally athletic and coordinated you are, how strong your upper back and midsection is. It's different. There's people, if you're just a monster strict presser, these guys exist, and they can just kind of lean back and strict press weights that's good enough to be competitive. Most people don't fall into that category. Most people aren't going to be able to strict press right off the bat on a log what they can with a barbell, although you have the potential to strict press more because it's elevated. It's just a matter of getting comfortable with the implement. Best thing you can do, practice push pressing, incorporate a lot of strict pressing, and that's about it. Really, when you're going to have to get comfortable cleaning the log. So the day of, you're going to have to get your hands on the log to practice the clean, which a good bystander, a good veteran of the sport should be able to teach you. Find somebody, be like, can you show me how to clean this really quick? Sit down, elbows up, stand up, and then use your hips to roll it through at the top. Once it's up here, you got to make sure you exhale, take a breath, and then go, or else you'll get lightheaded and likely pass out. And then once you get that big breath, you got to find your feet. You're going to be looking up at the sky. You're going to be rocking back and forth. You got to find your heels as quick as you can and just commit to getting a quick dip and drive. Don't hang out with the log on your chest too long. You got to commit to going. But what the spread is, I can't tell you, man. Good luck. And I like that. I like that you're going in blind. That's what I did. My first contest, my first event ever was my first time log pressing, axle cleaning, farmer's walk, tire flip, truck pull, stone load, all in the very first contest I ever did. It was exhilarating, and that's what hooked me. Specializing is important as you get further along, but for a lot of you new guys, jump in, man, because that's how you learn. It's like immersing yourself in a new language. You don't get fluent before you travel. Go travel. That'll make you fluent. Do I need to be able to barbell push press more than I want to log? Yeah, you really do if you're new to it. Let's see, flexibility. I don't have a lot to say about flexibility. Static stretching for 6 months, nearly every day with no noticeable improvement. Switch up your static stretches. Switch up the duration. Find barbell movements that put you in a different spot. Go different on go to a deficit on like Romanians or stiff legs, things like that. Not really my forte. I keep it pretty simple with stretching. Got some good advice. I appreciate the advice you guys are giving too, coming in, things I don't have time to answer. Ricardo, just want to say thanks for your sharing. Keep going with the Q&A. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Shield my shoulder seated behind the neck press. If they don't bother your shoulder, light behind the neck presses will cook your delts. Speak of blood flow, man. Go light and controlled. When is Shane Reed? When is an appropriate time to introduce band chains or other forms of accommodating resistance? Is there any value in using them versus using a movement variation like a front squat to increase strength? They're different. They're different approaches. You can consider them both variations, but where switching where the barbell is just switches the target to different muscles. So like a front squat, if you're not used to having the bar in front, your upper back, your midsection, your entire posterior has to work harder, but also differently to keep you upright. And staying upright, which you have to be, pushes your knees forward, which puts everything on the quads, right? So you're talking about shifting where the weight's going or where the work is being done. Bands and chains accommodating resistance, that's targeting your nervous system. It's targeting the exact way that your body recruits motor units. So as you push through, and there's even if you don't accelerate, let's just say you push it in even tempo, because it's getting heavier, 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 heavier. You're actually accelerating in some sense because you're recruiting more motor units. Force production is accelerating, it's increasing. So that's what they're used for. There's people that make them work for athletic training. I think that's where it's the best, where you need to jump high, run fast, be explosive. And low impact on the joints. That's a big one, especially bands. So I really like them for athletic stuff. I don't love them for barbell stuff. And that's not because they can't work or don't work. It's because the way they work is very specific. And there's a lot of specific methods of application you have to use to be able to get it to work with everything else that you're doing. Most of the people that want to use them don't need it. Okay. People have been developing big lifts without bands and chains for years, and many still do. A lot of the best lifters around don't use a ton of accommodating resistance. Some do, but a lot don't. So if you're a novice, intermediate, and you're trying to keep growing, don't get shiny object syndrome. Be like, well, those guys using bands. I'm not using bands. What are they doing? I want to do what they're doing. It's complicated. And that fact, I think, disqualifies a lot of people from being good candidates for using it, because if it is excessively complicated relative to the return, it's just going to be a giant pitfall in your training. So why do that? Now, if you happen to work under the oversight of somebody who is very seasoned and uses a lot of accommodating resistance and knows how to put it in, that's fantastic. More power to you. But I've been there. I know other people that have been there. The juice is not worth the squeeze if you just order a bunch of bands and you're dedicated to trying to make them work, because you're trying to like invent calculus from scratch. They go well with certain types of training programs, not all. And I don't know, the recovery is different. You still have to be doing a lot of stuff that works the bottom end, right? So if you're just doing, let's say, box squats with heavy bands on, you have to do something that loads you at the bottom. So it's also this thing that displaces good training. So you might just go nuts on all this banded stuff. They go, this is fun. This is great. I'm getting stronger. But if you're not careful, you can displace the training that was keeping you strong or getting you strong in the bottom. And once the weight, it's straight weight. If you're not as strong at the bottom, or if you've lost a touch, doesn't matter how strong you are at the top. The bottom is the most important part of the lift. So anyways, there's a lot that goes into it. I generally don't recommend it unless you're working with somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. S. Jason, my goal is to just improve my 1 rep squat and bench. Doing pull-up row would enough to get some decent back work. Well, regardless of what your goals are, if you're just talking about getting your back work in, pull-ups and rows, yeah, you don't have to go nuts. You can be very simplistic. In fact, I think it's better. Again, just for simplicity's sake, just a basic amount of rowing. You got a vertical, you got a horizontal row. You progress those movements over time. As those numbers improve, your back will get thicker and stronger in every way possible that you would need it for the main lifts. So yeah, as long as there's enough effort frequency and you're progressing those forward. Heavy squat and deadlift in the same session? Absolutely. There's no reason you can't. It's like conditioning. It's the same thing. People have these ideas like, well, because you're not training strength if you're a little fatigued, that, oh, thank you, Shane. I appreciate that. There's this idea that, well, if I'm training strength specifically, that if I'm a little fatigued, I'm not going to run 100-meter sprints after timing my mile, right? If I'm a little fatigued, I'm not training specifically strength. So it's in my best interest to be as specific as possible. So people talk themselves out of doing things that cause them to be fatigued at all, like general conditioning work. And that's where you get these fat shits that eat donuts during their 10-minute breaks in between sets. And like, oh, set till 5 is my cardio. Unloading the bar is my cardio. You can absolutely train to squat and deadlift. And if you're a power lifter, you have to do that anyways. Why would you not incorporate that in your training? If you're a strong man, you're going to be in much worse shape than just a heavy squat. A lot of guys are pulling 1,000-pound deadlifts on the back end of log clean and press each reps, moving medleys, Husserl carries, and on and on. So, yeah, you can. That doesn't mean just go ham on both. There should still be some finesse in your programming, but you can put effort on both of those. Absolutely. Do I still do remote coaching? Jorvar Powell. Yes, I do. I picked that back up again. I made some logistical changes that made it more manageable. So that is available on the website, empire-barbell-store.com. Just make sure you email me or DM me first. That info is on the store before you buy, because that is the only way I know that you bought it. And we're also doing, again, the 12-week. And I've actually sold some 16-week templates as well that are all personalized from scratch. None of this copy-paste bull. Freddie Bauer, makes me feel so much better because you ended the bull massive base block, worked my ass off, and feel like I got hit by a truck. Yeah, you did it right, my friend. Good for you. Why are squats so hated? I think it's awesome to start with to build up strength for many other exercises. Squatting, it's like RDLs. It's one of the lists. Like, they cure cancer. They're your answer for everything. Regrowing your hair. I haven't been squatting this year. That's the only reason I'm going bald. For growth, for athleticism, for strength. For some reason, people don't take them seriously in strongman, which drives me crazy. You don't have to, but I don't know why you would want to leave them out of your training. It's the only thing that it loads your entire body, ankle, knee, hip flexion with ankle, knee, hip extension with a ton of load. So it's strength specific, but it's also this movement pattern that carries over nicely to all these other movements we do. It is a fantastic general developmental tool, and it bypasses the big problem we have with programming. It is very easy to recover from, at least proportionate to other things. Squats are biomechanically friendly. People generally have a much easier time squatting regularly with effort than just about any other lift you can think of. So, yeah, I don't know. They're hated because they're hard. That's why. And I'm going to make this shirt. One of my favorite shirts, and I lost. I was mad. When Jesse Morende passed in 2007, I think, we went to World's Strongest Man when it was out here, and they were selling memorial shirts. And it was this kind of artistic drawing of him in the hole with a squat, and just said on the end, squat more. And that was one of my favorite shirts, because he was known for saying, it's like, oh, you got a problem. Like, oh, I need to stone load better, squat more. It's like, oh, my drive sucks on my overhead press. I'm not stable, squat more. My endurance sucks, squat more. And that's kind of it. So I force people to squat that really don't want to squat, because I think it's that good. Yeah, I don't know. They're hated because they're hard. It's also, man, it's a test of testicular fortitude, man. I got to go back to the 20 rep squats. I'm going to do another piece on that, because that's just, even if it doesn't fit neatly into the programming sphere, there's certain things that I think are rites of passage that teach you how to work hard that still provide a net value. 20 rep squats, man. That tells you if you can actually commit to hard effort. With my move to Texas, is Empire Barbell closing down or moving with me? No, it's not. I passed it off to 3 of our members, Eric King, Andrew Mock, who are both very good strongman competitors and peers that I look up to in that respect. I've been competing with them for a long time. And my good buddy, Carlton Russell, Tony, as he goes by, who was actually at my wedding, and he's a bodybuilder. And I keep telling Tony, man, I'm trying to get him to make videos. He should be taking the torch from like CT Fletcher. He's a very powerful motivational speaker. He's a great hype man. He's jacked. Is one of my good buddies, but they're going to turn it into something special. It's called, going forward, Hot Barbell, HOT. Don't ask me what it stands for. I have no idea. But they've already bought a bunch of kilo plates, and they're replacing the dumbbells. Basically, they're taking my shitty garage gym and updating it, and they're going to turn it into something. So I'm very excited with that. And I'm also very excited to just be a gym member again and not have to worry. This is my passion. Logistically managing a brick and mortar business, absolutely not my passion. They do not go hand in hand. So I'm really excited to see that they're carrying it forward. On the note of moving, man, I just got to get this off my chest. I try not to make my platform too personal or political or anything else, but I know everybody makes fun of California for sucking and everybody's moving to Texas and Tennessee and Florida, whatever. Sincerely, as somebody that doesn't like to give into hype or doesn't like to be too critical without looking at the other side first, it very much feels, and I talked to my wife about this, it very much feels like we're leaving a sinking ship. And that's not from the media, that's not from the news or whatever. That's from our day-to-day experience living in Southern California. We live about an hour east of LA in the Inland Empire. And San Bernardino, my grandparents lived there in the 50s. They died in the house they built in the 50s. Back in the day, San Bernardino was ranked one of the best places in the United States to live. And now it is known for being the exact opposite of that. And it's been a slow, steady change over the years. And you can cite population changes, demographic changes, cultural failure of the system, whatever you want to point to. The fact is there's something missing from our ability to maintain higher quality of life and maintain our communities. I don't know what it is. But just with the homeless problem, my wife was, I don't want to say assaulted, accosted twice in the last 2 months by someone, by a homeless person. Once she had a guy at a gas station yelling at her, banging on her car window when she was by herself at night. Another time she was meeting me downtown, this quaint downtown area that everybody goes to in Redlands, and getting out of her car by herself. Somebody started swearing at her and running after her. And then just last week, we were eating at our favorite sushi spot, and somebody threw a rock through the window. I don't mean a pebble. It was like the size of a shot put. Broke the glass, came into the window onto the table their family was eating at, and that was our lunch on a Saturday. And we see it. The community's changing. It's been in the last couple of years. It's aggressive. We are very excited to get out. It's substantial. The change is substantial, and there isn't a single person that seems to know what to do about it or is even motivated to actually make that type of change. So it sucks. I love this place for a lot of reasons. It sucks, but anyways, I can't express enough how valuable a well-kept community is, and that's what we're moving towards. We want to raise a family. I want roots dropped. I want to know my neighbors. I want my children to have accountability, because if they fuck up, like, they know the neighbors are going to rat their asses out because they know where they live. I want a community, and it very much feels like California is missing that. For as much as people throw the word community around, it doesn't feel like community. Anyways, that's my rant on California. I had to get that off my chest. That's my rant on California. Welcome to Texas. Thank you, brother. Yeah, excited, man. We went out 4 times this year, and we just loved it a little more each time. San Antonio, it's an amazing city from best I could tell. It's like a best kept secret. Everybody's talking about Austin, man. Don't go to Austin. Go to San Antonio. Okay, where's my spot? Sorry, man. I don't have a soapbox. I don't have very many people to talk to get this stuff off my chest. Sometimes you guys just gotta shoulder that burden. Let's see, I lost my spot. How would you approach someone who wants to improve? Oh, that kicked me out. Oh, you know what? Sorry. Yeah, I'll get back to that. I got to jump to the $12.34. Thank you, Justin Kim, in the super chat. As a beginner, in theory, if I need drastically improved appearances in a short amount of time, could I aggressively cut for 6 weeks to go 20 to 15% body fat, or would I need to use special sports supplements? Okay, so as a beginner, you can do whatever you want, and it will happen very quickly, as long as you are dedicated and you pay attention and you follow some set principles. So aggressively cut for 6 weeks to go to 20 to 15%. Okay, that depends where you are too, because you can only lose body fat at such a rate before you start sloughing off muscle tissue and maybe even bone density. You don't want to starve yourself. Cut aggressively. You should never be losing, unless you're like my 600-pound life status, you should never be losing more than about 2 pounds of body fat per week, because you will sacrifice a lot of muscle tissue if you do that. Look for about 1 to 2 pounds a week. So for an average person, let's say you're 25%, an average person, a 10 to 15 pound body fat drop is going to be enough to get you into the teens, unless you're excessively overweight. Now, if you are excessively overweight, I would say, yeah, make that a priority. Get the weight off. commit to it, show that you can get to that goal before you start to prioritize muscle building. That doesn't mean you don't lift weights. That doesn't mean you aren't active. It doesn't mean you aren't working on eating well. It just means commit to that's the primary thing you're oriented to, is getting the weight off. For the average person, though, 10 to 15 pounds of body fat, even if it's 20 to 25. Let's say you run 2 pounds a week, you're looking at 10 weeks, you're looking at 4 months, 6 months on average to get into that range. So you have a deadline there. It's quick. It's predictable. You can weigh yourself every few days, every week. Make sure it's the same time of day, empty stomach. And you can be like, oh, I'm another 1.5 pounds down. Great. Keep everything the same. Once the scale gets stagnant, titrate down, peel a little bit off. Okay, I'm going to cut down on my rice. I'm going to, maybe I'm going to take that snack out in the middle of the day. It has to be regimented. So you're going to want to pay all of your attention on your diet. Make sure you're actually doing cardio. Yes, cardio is good for you, even if you're lifting weights and trying to get stronger. Sorry about that. Sports supplements, no. I mean, all of those things are the cherry on top. So even if you think of fat burners, things that accelerate your metabolism or get you to sweat more, burn more calories, that's great if you're already competitive and you're trying to, increase how well you're doing in the margins. For a novice, for a beginner, absolutely not, man. Get your eating in check. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Just find a role model and stick to it and soak it up. Don't jump between different dietary protocols. We had some members do very well with the Renaissance periodization diet templates. Even if it fits your macros, I don't care. It gets you the understanding of how your diet works together. So make sure you're moving this much every week. Don't cut yourself short. Don't give yourself credit if you skipped. And then make sure you're titrating your diet down just into that sweet spot without letting the floor drop out. So I appreciate the super chat, man. As a beginner, dude, you got blue skies ahead of you. Really, as a beginner, you can do so much with so little work. All of this little hyper detailed, hyper specialized stuff, that's required when you've already done most of the hard work, hard building, when again, you're trying to work in the margins. So no sports supplements, diet and exercise, buddy. That's what it comes down to. So Justin Kim, thank you for that. Okay. I was halfway through answering a question. I feel bad. I cut it off. Okay. S. Jason, how would you approach someone who wants to improve a lift and put the two others on hold for performance? That's a really good question. And that's actually a very intelligent way to program, to know that this is what I'm focusing on for this block. You're not always going to be able to move everything up in the exact same way. So if you have, especially if something's really lagging for you guys that deadlift 200 pounds more than your squat, or let's say you're going into a meet that benefits from one thing over the other. I raked it over the coals, fifth set, but fifth set had a really good method of doing it. It took the squat. You pick one, either squat or deadlift, and the other one is just 10% back, and the work is back. And I think you didn't go to an AMRAP, but it was a very clever way, and they had you pick it based on what you were capable of at the time. So you decide what you recover from better. You decide what's better or worse, what you need to focus on. So that was a good move, and I actually absolutely think you should do that. Thiel Van Den, sorry for butchering your name, man. Thiel Van Den Wevel. Just want to thank you for great content, Alex. You and Alzru have me motivated like never before. Stay strong, even when small. All the best. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I appreciate all the kind words. I have a big ego, but it can never be big enough. So if you just want to drop some blind praise, like I'm always taking just blind praise. But sincerely, though, I do try to give as much vital information to you guys as I can, things that I struggled with and that I regularly help other people who are struggling with, things that don't get clarified quite as easily. And that's what I'm trying to fixate on. So it's the small stuff. It's the foundational stuff that goes over people's heads, and that's where it's at. So I'm happy you're motivated. I'm not going to be strong when small, but I'll be here. All right. 198s, here I come. Jacob Henderson. Hey, Bromley. Yeah, Jacob's a member. I gotta work on those little membership emojis, man. I was in a rush and I threw those together. I think I have animal faces of different colors. And the longer you are, you upgrade to different animals. So guys, I'm working on it. Thank you for your patience as I figure out how to use these social media platforms to earn a living. I'm back. What's my go-to meal for a dirty bulk or for big caloric surplus? Oh man, I dug myself into a hole with that one because that goes into like it's this neat thing that we can look at that has been useful at times, but also isn't appropriate for most people. I've done dirty bulks before, and it has gotten me stronger. But I was in novice intermediate territory when I should have just been getting my diet straightened out. So yeah, I did better. I got bigger and stronger, but I also fat fucked myself pretty well, and that's really for running it too long. So if you are, God, what's the advice I could give here? Well, first of all, my go-to meal, man, I have a sweet tooth, and my wife hates me because I will destroy my stomach when the brakes come off and I'm just all gas. I will go cereal is a big thing. I was famous for doing like cereal with cream, Klondike bars, um, ice cream Oreos. It would be like a sundae, but with like cocoa pebbles. I was for a while. I was eating a pie from Sprouts every night. I love their double berry pie. It's just amazing. It's usually pastries, and insulin is extremely anabolic. Insulin is fantastic for growth. There's a reason bodybuilders abuse it. It makes you bigger, it makes you stronger, and you can jack your insulin levels up by eating a fuck ton of sugar. But you can also get yourself pre-diabetic and get a nice band of body fat. Hard gainers in the short term, it's appropriate for. There we go. See, it's a sinking ship I'm leaving. That's the police helicopter that flies over our apartment complex every other week. What was I saying? Dirty bulking, man. If you want to commit to moving up a few weight classes and you can say, okay, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and I'm just going to go ham, that's fine. Be ready. Be ready once you come off to strip your body fat back down to get to a reasonable weight, because the bloat comes and goes very quick, but you want to make sure the body fat doesn't accumulate over the years. And that's why you probably also shouldn't do it if you don't have a good handle on your diet to begin with. If you don't actively know how to clean your diet up and lose body fat without dumping muscle, it's probably not the route to go. But yeah, for me, man, dirty bulk, it would just be carbs. Even with mediocre amounts of protein, if your carb intake is through the roof, you can grow, but it runs havoc on your endocrine system. To do John Mack, the first rep of my bench looks like I'm doing tempo work. For some reason, I'm extremely slow at bringing the bar to my chest. I feel like I'm going to get crushed and flatten out. Any ideas on to fix it? There's nothing wrong with lowering a bar under control. But you need to know where that switch is to where you touch, you can accelerate through. And it's probably the percentages, because if that's 85, 90, 95% of your max, it moves like that. 60% of your max won't move like that. 70% of your max won't move like that. So more work with lighter weights that allow you to be controlled and explosive. That's my advice for that. Just adjust the training threshold. And if you are an especially slow toe mater forklift type lifter who just moves at a snail's pace once the weight gets heavy, you might have to drop the weight lower than most other people would. But if you want to build up speed and be more comfortable at the bottom, that's a way to do it. You can also do pause benches, maybe benches right off the pins if the pins are like an inch or 2 inches above your chest. But if you do that, make damn sure that the weights are still light enough for you to not grind, for you to actually build a little speed. And that's different than speed work. That's teaching intent. That's teaching a pace. That's getting your nervous system up to snuff. We're not trying to use speed to supplement strength. So for certain people, I think learning how to move quicker, more aggressively with greater neural drive is absolutely absolutely vital. Like, it is useful to them. I don't count that as the same as like generic West Side speed work though. Aaron Nelson, thank you. $10 super chat, man. You guys are great here. You mentioned 20 rep squats as a rite of passage. When would you do the super squats program in terms of training life? I'm 36 and did gray skull for 8 weeks, and now 4x4 and 4x8 for a few weeks. Okay, so if you're pretty new, I'm assuming that means like that's most of your training so far. Maybe not yet, because here's the thing: these super squats is high fatigue, and if you are too new, you're going to find that once a little bit of fatigue sets in, you're going to have pretty glaring weaknesses right off the bat, and it's just extraordinarily likely that technique is going to falter, even though your legs and hips can still force you through a bunch of ugly reps. That's not what we want. So at the point where you feel like you can actually kind of last through a high rep set without falling apart, where you don't feel like your shoulders are dumping forward, you don't feel like your knees are getting all wobbly, uh, or your hips are getting out of position. If you feel like you can come down and up in this nice fluid pattern and you can sustain that even when fatigue starts to set in, then that's when you're going to be about ready. Um, for those of you that don't know super squats, it's essentially take something around your 10 rep max and just hang out with it for as long as you need to get to 20. It sucks. Squats are the only thing you can do this with because you recover at the top. You're so strong at the top, you can actually recover. So it's like a big density set, or it's like rest pause almost. But every rep, you're taking 3 big, deep breaths. So it'll take 2 minutes to get through. Fatigue is very, very high. But if there are obvious holes in your squat approach, it's going to work against what you're trying to do. So get your foundation. Gray Skull's fantastic. I love Gray Skull. And the rep ranges you're adjusting to, that's fantastic. Just keep technique up here until it's automatic. And then when you feel a bit more secure, I probably wouldn't have anybody do it who's been training for less than a year, if I'm being honest. Say early intermediate, if you can still call yourself a novice, it's probably not as appropriate. But then again, it comes down to technique. It really is a technical issue. That's my concern. My concern is the technical issue. It's not the threshold. It's not the fatigue. It's not if it's specific enough. It's if your positioning isn't going to screw you up or teach bad habits. That's the gold standard you're looking for. Ryan Bilton, any tips for early morning strength training? It's tough to eat a full breakfast beforehand. It's difficult to train fasted. Small meal, I mean, right there, Goldilocks zone. If you have to train early because of your schedule, and I hate training early because I move like the Tin Man until about 1 p.m. If you have to, trying to think, you just need carbs in. Don't eat any protein. Assuming you're going to eat right after, don't bog yourself down with protein. It's not going to do anything. Don't get caught up with like little minutia, like, oh, maybe I'll take some BCAAs or something. Don't worry about the muscle wasting, man. You're going to absorb everything you eat right after the workout, and through the rest of the day. Trust me, you will be in a net growing phase. You just need fuel, carbs. That's it, carbs. So a drink, maybe a Cliff Bar or something, maybe even like part of a muffin. I don't know. You just need carbs. So, and that's good because it's dense. It won't take up a lot of space. No protein, no fats. Save that for what you eat immediately afterwards, and you'll be fine. Yeah, Aaron Nelson, protein shake and a banana or granola bar. There you go. I would honestly skip the protein shake just because it takes a little more time to digest and kind of sit in your stomach if you go right into a training session. But it's easier than a full breakfast. And again, if your stomach can handle it, there's nothing wrong with it. But if that's a big problem for you, just focus on the carbs. Thank you for answering my questions. You guys got it, man. It's a pleasure. I'm just excited to see how many people show up for this. How should I pay attention to scap positions from John Doe during an overhead press for maximal joint safety? How about a chin up? How should I pay attention to scap position during an overhead press for joint safety? That's not something I worry about too much. And maybe you could talk to an Aaron Horschig or something, and he might have insight. I don't see a lot of shoulder joint issues that tend to develop from overhead pressing, and maybe it's because it's not as popular as benching. I tend to think benching is just overall a worse movement, given how many people do it and how many people get issues at some point. I don't know a ton of people who have overuse issues in their shoulder from overhead pressing. And there's this whole debate about impingement. Some people say it's horrible for you because like that joint, like where your scapula meets like your collarbone, like as it comes up, like it gets impinged, and that's horrible for you and you shouldn't do it. And then Ripito had a pretty good video where he demonstrated how the scapula actually glides up and kind of wings up and out to the side so that it actually can't get impinged in that position. I have no idea what's right or what's true. I just go by what I tend to see out in the field, and I don't see a ton of issues. Some people definitely get shoulder issues. I'm just saying it doesn't seem to be as prevalent of an issue. There was an exercise that one of the medical guys at our gym showed me for scapular retraction. And it wasn't about getting them retracted together. It was about getting them depressed, getting them down to help with shoulder mobility. And what he would have us do is take a foam roller and put it on the wall and put your arms like this. And your job was to roll it up and straighten your arms. Well, if you're actively keeping your scapula depressed, you feel all of this shit. That's the stuff that gets glued down that prevents you from moving better. But even then, I mean, that was kind of a cue to help visualize mobility and whatever. I don't even know that was a cue for how you should actually be moving when you press. My generic answer is not to worry about it, but I'm happy to say I'm not entirely an expert in something like that. You might want to seek out more knowledgeable people. Boxer Fencer, what's your take on thermogenic value of each macros, use of net carbs over total carbs, limiting fructose intake, and establishing an optimal leucine intake? I hope you're trolling me because my dietary approach is very caveman-like. If each field of expertise is like an onion, I barely get the dry part off, the dry, scabby shell. With diet, I look at just really big shit, and it's, am I growing? Okay, I'm not eating enough. Let me take up my protein intake. Am I getting too fat? Okay, let me dial down my portions. Let me clean up my food a little bit. If I were ever to get to that point, I would just outsource it to an actual nutritionist. Is there something a nutritionist would have an opinion on? Generally, I tend to think all of that stuff is not useful for the average person. Most people don't, even most trainees who are actually interested in this stuff, don't have a reasonable idea of how to piece together a reasonable diet and how to adjust it depending on their needs. And the vast majority of it is going to be the things I discussed, the types of foods you're eating, how much of it you're eating, how much you're moving. So all this other stuff, that's like the little cherry on the top of the sundae. Cody R, don't respond well to high volume on bench. I respond much better to fives, triples. I think the problem is that I have a hard time maintaining technique for a long set. This is a problem you see a lot. So response has to do with what you're used to doing. And also response, I mean, what do you mean? Like if you're doing high volume on bench and you expect to set a 5-rep max in the immediate future, that's probably not going to be the case. I am a big advocate of volume. I think it's important, but you have to know how to progress the volume to gauge the response. And you also have to know what to look for to show that you're responsive to it. For instance, when you start lifting heavy, especially if you're newer, it feels like you get stronger every workout. And that's because these are neurological adaptations that happen very, very quickly. If you're doing volume and the purpose is to grow muscle and to increase strength by widening your base out, muscle growth takes time. Unless you're a teenager or you're really underweight, or if it's your first time actually eating an appropriate amount of food, you're not going to see these massive swings in volume. You'll see your endurance come up a little bit. Your rep endurance should come up. But that's why I really push the volumizing approach, because it forces you to stay in a block of training where you're actually adapting to these increases in volume. And then you drop back and recover, and then you increase volume again. So as you get in better shape and your capacity ticks up, that's when you're able to handle even more volume than you ever would have been able to handle otherwise. And the result is a fuck ton of muscle growth, generally, assuming you're eating well enough. So it's not response. I mean, everybody is going to grow from volume, especially if you're newer. Just like everybody's going to grow from 5s and 3s. There's so many triggers for growth. To what makes this field confusing. Most fields, you get like your method. There's one method, and you just try to work that better and better. In this field, there are a ton of triggers for growth that will make you stronger, whether it's reps, whether it's volume, whether it's different exercise, different splits, different training thresholds, different levels of effort, and they're all valid. You have to make it work. So if you did something and it didn't work, you can't just write off, be like, well, I don't respond to that. You have to make sure you put in enough time to figure out why. And with any good long-term training approach with your training lifetime, the only way you're going to continuously grow over time is if you know how to work back and forth between different thresholds. It's not enough to know that 5s and 3s get me strong. Trust me when I say there is a point where they will not do that anymore. And you have to figure out what to change. Might be swapping out the exercises, although that's a little more complicated. Might be changing the frequency of your split, although that's also a little complicated. Might be addressing more recovery. The easiest answer tends to be changing the amount of volume you're working with, changing the rep range you're working in. You adapt to different rep ranges the fastest. That tends to be the easiest answer. So you want to make sure you know how to operate back and forth between those. Shane Reed, thanks, Alex. Excellent advice and content as always. I appreciate that, Shane. Thank you. Man, we're coming down. See, I told myself an hour, and then I'm like, I got an hour and a half. It's like, when I got shit else to do today. I got to pack. This is me procrastinating. I have to pack, putting this off. Swolepool FGC. Do you think we could talk sometime? Absolutely, man. I don't have them advertised on my store, but I've had people that have taken an hour, and I charged what I do for like a training session, to just pick my brain about whatever questions they want. And if it's in line with like what the time I spend on a template, and the charge is similar. So if any of you ever want to talk, if you have direct questions, you want to talk to me in person, or over the phone, yeah, go ahead and reach out. Just send an email, a DM, something, and we can set that up. What are the advantages of being small or smaller? You live longer. Day-to-day stuff becomes easier. You don't feel like your head is going to explode every time you bend over to pick up a quarter. No, I don't know. Honestly, I am looking forward to having less weight on my joints day to day. I think it'll help with my knees recovering. It'll help me get a little more mobile. Trying to stretch when you're bloated and in peak mode is not fun. It's not easy. So I am planning on doing a lot of things to improve. This is part of my base. I always say you got to widen your base. That's part of my base that's missing, and it's costing me. I need to get healthier. I need to move better. I need to be able to incorporate things that are harder to do when you're bigger. And that's part of the process. I'm just going way into the weeds because, again, I talked about being natty for the rest of next year. So I'm not going to try to frustrate myself by chasing numbers when I know that I'm going to be on this roller coaster as my levels drop and then eventually come back up over time. So I'm looking forward to it, man. Psychology. There you go. Psychology is a big one. Adam Youssef, what do you do if you ate a meal that you can't count the calories in? A lot of diet questions. I have trouble with these. I'm sure nutritionists would have good insight to that, but I really don't. I think the answer would be don't eat a meal you can't count the calories. That would be it if you're serious about it. Or just overestimate. That's a hard one, man. Prep ahead. Make sure you're not at the mercy of whatever fast food places around you. Although I guess if your mom makes lasagna or something, that's a little tricky. Every restaurant has a nutrition sheet. About how heavy your paused deadlift should be compared to your conventional ones. If you mean paused around the shin or like midway up, that's also a hard one. That'll vary wildly from person to person. I don't think there's a good I think a good sign that that's not a weak point anymore is that it's getting closer, but there isn't like a set ratio. Do you need the overhead press in your program when training for powerlifting? No, you don't need it. And there's plenty of people that don't have it, but it's another one of those things. Why would you not? This is something strongmen know because everybody's concerned with bench pressing, but strongmen are specifically concerned with overhead pressing. And they know that you could have the biggest bench in the world. You're not going to automatically be a fantastic overhead presser. There's guys who would run circles around Julius Maddox in an overhead press event, even though he's inarguably one of the strongest upper bodies on the planet. Specificity is different. So benching doesn't necessarily carry over to overhead. Overhead 100% carries over to benching. It is better than any other exercise you can think of for growing your delts. Your delts are huge in driving up a bench press. That's what we know. So I think it's a very, very, very good idea. Just prioritize it developmentally. Don't chase heavy weights. Don't try to peak out a max for your overhead, but use it for volume. Use it across a variety of rep ranges. It's fantastic for getting your bench up. Gaining strength when cutting, you don't. Generally, you don't. You might. If you do, it's because you were very undertrained and very overweight, and you just went to a normal amount of diet and exercise. But assuming you have a reasonable body fat and you've already gotten a little bit stronger, your best bet is to just consult a bodybuilder or a nutritionist that deals with bodybuilders to get your diet straightened out and run it just to the T, razor thin. A good one's going to vary your intake day to day based on your training, and they'll be very hands-on. But you have to run it razor thin generally. And the leaner you get, or the leaner you're trying to get and the more specialized you're trying to get in strength, the less likely it is that you're going to pull it off well. But that's why cutting takes a few weeks. Getting, 10 pounds of body fat off. You can do that in 6 weeks, 8 weeks if you're slow. So get it off, then get a reasonable diet and build in the context of a diet that's not going to fat fuck you. Any suggestions for cheap weights? Nah, man, everything's expensive. Even when I was trying to get weight, I kept waiting for my gym. I kept waiting for things to come down. Even the auction sites I would frequent got stupid expensive. Tips for plantar fasciitis. Yeah, I've had that a few times. That's a bitch when you get out of bed and your heel hurts. Feels like you stepped on a nail. What did I do to get rid of plantar fasciitis? Heel stretches. God, I had a whole regimen. I forgot it. It was years ago. I want to say heel stretches helped. Rolling around my foot on a lacrosse ball helped. Rest helped. I think I had it when I was on my feet a lot, and I was 280 pounds, and I was serving at Yard House, and those restaurants are massive. Just having to walk back and forth. I'd walk like 6 miles in a shift, 5 nights a week, and standing on your feet for that long just killed me. I think that's where it came from. So rest, trying to avoid the types of things that light it up. So once I got off my feet, that made a big difference. There's I'm sure some good WebMD articles that'll address that better than I can. Stay far away from Austin. Dude, I learned that the hard way. Everybody was building up Austin, man. And I thought, I'm like, look, I don't want to go, I'm not trying to go into Confederate flag territory, but I did like the idea of moving to a more conservative state for the things I was looking for. And I thought, well, I'm comfortable with California, and I get charitable to some progressive ideals. I like the idea of people that care, even if I disagree with some of their proposals, whatever. I'm like, yeah, maybe a blue city and a red state. Maybe that's going to be the right mix of, young tech crowd and creative types and people oriented in the humanities, but also having kind of culture and expectations and kind of I was trying to find this cruising altitude. God, we drove into Austin. It is like mini LA. I'm like, man, they never talked when everybody was trumping up Austin. They never talked about the rampant, unchecked homelessness. Our hotel, they gave us a sheet and they drew a red line here and here. And they're like, don't go down these streets. There was mini Skid Row. And it's part of the culture there. You can see they almost think it's neat that it's like, oh, it's their little Coachella, is the people that have these tents and have just garbage. I mean, piled up to your head. If there's a patch of grass on a median, there's a tent, and there's people in the middle of schizophrenic episodes. It's messy. It's a mess. Anyways, it's enough of that. It's enough ranting about the homeless. It's not all privileged here in my fancy 1-bedroom apartment, punching down to the homeless. Austin is Cali light, no doubt. Who would you recommend giving Smolov a try for bench? What's the benefit? I wouldn't. Honestly, I wouldn't. Assuming that all of your joints are just bulletproof, assuming your durability is just level 10, then high frequency is the way to go. High frequency is probably the best, most reliable way to train and get your lifts up over time. That's the limiting factor, though, is what your tendons, joints, connective tissue can handle on a regular basis. That's why we don't all go high frequency. It's not your muscles. Your muscles and nervous system can adapt to just about everything. They bounce back super quick. It's your joints. So as much as people will go on Smolov and say, yeah, I put 100 pounds on my squat, but now I have, chronic patellar tendonitis, it's almost guaranteed with your bench. I mean, even benching 2 to 3 times a week is hit or miss depending on the individual. So I would not recommend it, honestly. It's not to say you can't do it and it wouldn't work. It's just not very likely that you would make it out scot-free. Justin Kim, sorry. Oh, I meant going from 20% body fat to 15% body fat. Okay, yeah. If you're going from 20 to 15, the question was going to 20 to 15 is easy. As a beginner, going from 20% to 15%, very easy. I mean, work it out mathematically. If you're 20% body fat, you weigh 200 pounds, that's 40 pounds of body fat. So to get 5% off, you have to get 10 pounds off. You have to go to 20. No, wait, my math's off. You have to get 10 pounds off. Sorry. 10 pounds of body weight you have to get off. You have to go from 40 to 30. Sorry, I'm petting my dog and I can't do math at the same time. 10 pounds is nothing. 6 weeks, put it on the calendar. Little extra cardio, keep track of your diet. Easiest thing in the world, man. Easy. Because most people don't have the attention span to commit to it. It's not that it's difficult. And it's like finishing what you start is big, and those are skills that most people don't learn, or they get comfortable doing things half-assed or not all the way. One of the best things I did, especially when I was trying to build all this stuff, which requires paying attention and finishing what you start, I had a therapist friend when I was rampant procrastinator, maybe a borderline alcoholic. Her advice to me was get a puzzle, just finish it. Just feel what it feels like to put that last piece in to finish something. And that hit home, and it framed how I looked at every little task I do, whether it's cleaning up, whatever task I do, it's like, okay, just finish it. Dieting is this hard thing. Even for us that like going to the gym, dieting is very difficult for us because of that. We have a hard time committing and finishing, and we easily talk ourselves out of it. So just commit, finish, learn as you go, adjust as needed. That's it. EU rhymes with O in our world. Oh, because I put Huevel. Yeah, like, okay, Hovel. Got it, man. Sorry about that. Jacob Henderson. Hey, Alex, what do you think of Ivan Jurek? He's a squat every day guy, documents it every day. I've came across his channel. Smaller guy, decently strong. Doesn't look brutally strong, but maybe he has some lifts up that I haven't seen. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Ivan. Squat every day guy. I'm not a fan of squatting every day. Even for the most competitive, it seems like it still has some pitfalls associated with it. So it's not obvious that it's better. So when I see somebody who's not as well developed and they're committed to it, it's almost like, especially when you're documenting it, it's almost like you're living this lifestyle as a patch you put on your jacket, more so than being oriented towards getting the best results. So I'm skeptical. I can't really comment on him though, because I don't know a lot about him or what his journey's like. I think I've come across a handful of videos. Reed Tompkins, what up, man? Man, Reed Tompkins watching my YouTube live stream. For those of you that don't know, Reed is a nasty 105 competitor. I've had the pleasure of competing against him a few times at nationals, Clash on the Coast. He's had a couple of injuries, and I think he's on the way back. I was expecting to see him at Worlds. I think I saw his name up there, but he didn't end up going out. There were a lot of good guys that were slated to go to Worlds that dropped out. But Reed is fast, and he has some grit, man, that they don't make him like that anymore. Even my wife, man, we were watching him, and she's like, he just doesn't stop. Man, what is up, Reed? Thanks for watching, man. Get healthy, dude. When I make my comeback, bro, I better see you out there. Boxer Fencer, you should be grateful the police take interest in your community because of the police helicopter. Yeah, I guess they do. I guess they do. Although when that rock came through the sushi place we were eating at, we were there for another 45 minutes because, of course, we got to finish our sushi, and no cops to see. So anyways, that's funny. Rick Latham, digressing, doing pull-ups from 4 sets, 5 sets with 5 pounds to doing bands, 3 sets of 5 to 7, very hard to a set of 5 with no weight. Any advice? Was thinking about doing ladders of 3. I can't give very specific progression advice, man. And that's not because I'm not able to. It's just that's going to take so much time. And I want to get through these. I'm already at an hour and a half, man. But you guys are cooking. The coffee's starting to hit. So let me get through a few more. How to come back from shoulder pain in the bottom of pressing movements. All the advice on pain I've given before. Find an entry, something that doesn't hurt. Dial back the threshold. That's it. Be patient. Yes, just a joke. I know it's just a joke. Do you drink diet drinks? I do, actually. Coke Zero. Me and my wife get in a fight because she likes Diet Coke for God knows what reason. I think Diet Coke is foul. Coke Zero, for whatever reason, I'm fine with. orange soda diet, like Sunkissed, when I'm cutting, man, I don't know why that hits the spot. Crystal Light, love Crystal Light, man. The raspberry lemonade Crystal Light is the shit. And that helps. The little illusion of sweetness really helps. Like I said, I have a sweet tooth. I get cravings. So anything that helps with that will keep the calories down. Probably giving myself cancer, but so does most of the things I do day to day. Any reprints on the Empire Barbell baseball tee? Not planned. I got to update the shirts. I got some new logos I got coming out. I might have to phase out the Empire Barbell logo too, since that's technically extinct. Tendonitis, again, I have a hard time with the injury questions, man. I take such a blanket approach. There's a lot of good stuff. Look, tendonitis, I went through the knees over toes guy stuff before he blew up. It's pretty good. I recommend going that route. And a lot of the videos, I don't know that you have to buy, although support him if you can. But there's a lot of free stuff on YouTube too. Best way to come back from septoplasty. I'm assuming that's your septum. You have a deviated septum. I have no idea if that's what that means. Best way to come back. Intermediate wants to compete in a year. For 2 weeks, that doesn't even require a comeback. So you come back, 2-week deload, a week very light, getting your feet wet, and a week medium heavy, and then go right back to the progression you were on. Brian Carroll doesn't like high reps on the main movements because he feels like it's hard to keep tight for that long. What are your thoughts? He's absolutely right. And for who he is and what he does, his entire life is getting as tight as you can under an immense amount of compression. If you haven't, my dogs are so needy today. If you haven't been in a suit, it's miserable. Squat suits are absolutely horrendous, or bench shirts. And you have to fight, not just to move the weight, you have to fight to maintain position in the context of the suit, which is why they move so goddamn slow. So for what he does, that makes sense. But there's still plenty of people who utilize reps on compound movements. I mean, if you're a strongman, you don't have a choice, right? So there's a way to move. Now, the thing is, it's similar to the CrossFit argument with Olympic lifting. Very similar. People it's heresy that you would do a clean or a snatch in this modified way for the demands of the workout. It's a different way to move it. That's what it is. Long story short, it's a different way to move it. There's a different way to do reps than to do an absolutely peaked out 1 rep max in a squat suit with 1,100 pounds. You're going to be looser. You're not going to be so hyper fixated on bracing. Your positioning might change mildly, and it's a skill. And you want to practice it as such. So I understand why he does it. And obviously he's shown that to compete at that level, you don't need it. I think for general people, though, it's a beautiful way to grow. I think it's faster and it's less, oh, come on, baby. And it's less specific and it checks more boxes. I got dog hair all over my fancy superior deadlift shoot, man. Check that out, empire-barbell.com. Going to, man, I feel like as long as I'm here, those questions are coming. Don't ask me if your lifts are decent. That's a pet peeve of mine. Good for you for getting after it, man. Don't ever ask me if your lifts are decent. Yeah, you put a 900 yoke for 100 feet at 105. Like, that's decent. Come on, man. When dieting, should I switch to bodybuilding training from powerlifting training? Not like... And even the labels are a little bit not helpful because there's a lot of bleed over. There's a lot of people in both that train with features of the other. But yeah, I've heard that. More volume, more exercises, more time in the gym. Absolutely. That'll help. I heard that from Marty Gallagher. He was talking about when he used to train Karwoski, what they would do is they would usually get the body fat off. They'd use the high volume phases to do that. Exercise to strengthen spinal erectors. Anything where you actually move your spine, where you extend and round forward. Stone loads are great. Bag work is great. A lot of strongman stuff is. Isolation-wise, reverse hypers are probably the best to target that. Back extensions, if you kind of exaggerate the round at the bottom and the extension at the top, although that'll get you a back pump really fast. You're not going to drive home within 20 minutes of doing that. Supermans, if you're laying out flat on the ground and putting your legs and arms up, you'll be amazed at how much that hits your erectors. Judo training and strength program training, that's hard, man. It's a whole can of worms. Generally with athletic stuff, I tell people, first of all, somebody asked this the other day, don't just do my templates and think you're going to do it in the context of your other athletic endeavor. You won't. It'll be very hard. Whole body generally. I like doing upper body and lower body. Nothing to failure. Nothing even really, really high volume. Select for lower volume workouts, either lower reps or less sets. Or if you do higher reps, keep it to one set. And then you just got to take notes on how you recover because everybody's different. Man, so many. All right, I feel like we're getting to the end. Guys. Have I heard of Hepburn? Yes, I have. It's a slow step loading. I've got a lot of questions. I don't know why. I don't know anybody that does it in practice. I know that's just one of those things where that boxer or where that it's how I've been on too long. Senility is sneaking in. That blog post has gotten popular or something, or there's enough of them where now it's on people's radar. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I don't know much about it in terms of who's ran it. I like step loading, but there's, I think, better ways to step load. That's just me. What percentage do you use when programming variations of the main lift? Ideally, percentages of that lift. If you don't have one, you can estimate. You just take your heaviest work. Yeah, you wouldn't use squats for front squats. I might use the same percentage on like a pause variation. But like a front squat's wildly different. Like you might find your close grip bench is way different than your regular bench, or like for an incline, you wouldn't use the same number. For behind the neck press, you wouldn't use your regular strict press percentage. So ideally you have an idea of where your upper limit is. Just take your last heaviest set and punch it into a 1 rep max calculator. It doesn't have to be exact. Just has to be ballpark. Squat depth, if it's causing lower back pain, that's bracing, mobility, positioning. That's it. Start with goblet squats. For some reason, putting a weight in front, everything lines up naturally. It's easier to maintain posture. Videotape it or look in a mirror. You want to look at your low back. If you're getting an excessive wink, it may be playing into some issue you have. So that's it. Get your mobility right. Learn how to brace. Learn how to be in that maintain that position into a bottom of a squat. Shane Reed, what are your future plans for the YouTube channel? Got any other interviews lined up? A lot more of this, and this is actually helping me fulfill my obligation to the Patreon members that I've been lagging on. So thank you guys for all of your help with that. I will be paying more attention to you guys down the road, and I'm using this to answer all those questions, give you guys some value so it's not just a tip jar. I'm going to follow through once we get settled. More videos like the last 4 or 5 I put out where I felt like my quality was getting higher. I was spending a lot more time editing, and I want to be able to plan them out more thoroughly. So I'm accepting I'm not going to be as frequent, except if I do live streams, but the quality's ticking up. So I have to get settled. It'll be another month before I start getting those out. No interviews. At least I'm not going to seek them out. I don't mind doing interviews. I just don't consider myself a very good interviewer. I like having conversations with people. I just don't know how exciting they are. Some people are really good at interviewing. I have a hard time with it, I think. But I think what I've been doing so far is a good, good sweet spot. Advice on cutting, maintaining, gaining strength. I've answered that kind of earlier on. Congrats for your awesome content. Thank you. Appreciate that. Recommendation for your first cycle. Don't go on. There you go. I will never give gear advice on this channel, except to say, if you think you're ready to do it, you're probably not ready to do it. Guys, I'm going to have to wrap it up right here because every time I think we're getting close, man, you guys just come in. I appreciate the participation. I appreciate all of this content, man. Remember, in the future, questions priority goes to Patreon and YouTube members and anybody that uses the super chats. So thank you for today for everybody who participated. I will timestamp this one so you'll be able to look through it and be able to cut through and see the things you're interested in. Oh man, I need to go gargle some salt water after that. Thanks again, guys. I'll be doing this probably a couple times a week until we move. So I might see you in 4 or 5 days, but until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.